Sorry, I just don't want to look smart.
Got a blooper reel. Hi, thanks for coming to our first podcast, and thanks to Dave, who's over there behind the camera, who suggested this, and a huge thanks to both of you for volunteering to come for session one, although I thought we were asking you questions, but apparently now this is somewhat changed and you're going to be asking us questions, but we'll work it out. So we've decided to name the podcast the Beckfoot Lifelong Learners Podcast, and we're going to start each episode with a couple of key questions. So to kick us off, could you both tell us your name, what your role is at Beckfoot, and something that you have learnt recently?
I'm going to go first, or shall I go first?
You can go first.
Oh, okay. I'm Amy Lowell. I'm a PE teacher here. This is Beckfoot Lifelong Learners. I am a Beckfoot lifer. You're a Beckfoot lifer.
I am as well, yeah.
We've been here since we started teaching. Dave, when did we start here?
2009.
Huh? 2009, so, a while. And I'm a teacher of PE. I don't know if I've already said that. And something I've learned recently, I think a couple of things. First one isn't really teaching and learning based, but I think it's helped just in life in general and in teaching when you're tired. Dave listens to a lot of podcasts, and he was like, I listened to something the other day, and he said something about changing your mindset. Instead of, I have to do this, think of, I get to do this. Yeah. So I think that's something that just this week, actually, I've been like, I'm tired, but no, I get to do this. I get to be here with this lovely school and my best friends in the department and around school, and on the whole, like, amazing kids. I get to be here, I get to do this. So that was something that's just given me a little bit of a boost around school and in the classroom. And then along with that positivity vibe, I think watching Joe, like someone who is still been here for a while, but less time than I have, watching him and being partnered with him in instructional coaching, obviously I learn when I go and watch him all the time. Even if it's not the target that he's focusing on, I pick up stuff from him and I'm like, that's cool. But it's just Joe's energy and clarity. And I think, so as well as taking his ideas of teaching, just being reminded that even though I've been here since I started teaching, just to be reminded that I'm always learning and I can always pinch stuff from other people. I think that's what's reinvigorated me this week, I would say.
I love that. Yeah.
Excellent. So my name is Matt Stimpson. I'm the faculty leader for creativity, and I started here in 2004. So, things I've learned. I learned at the open evening that there are some parents who are going to be bringing their kids here next year, and I taught them when they were in year 7, and that scared me an awful lot. I think the other thing as well, we've been doing a lot about starts and ends of excellence. I think I've noticed just how important they are, but also it kind of coincided with something at home. So I've got 2 daughters, and one's 6, so she's just gone into year 2, and she was they've been doing whiteboards in class, and the impact they have on the kids. And also sometimes she was saying, Daddy, I'm not managing to write 3 things on them, and maybe realising just how much it means to the kids, and also giving them that thinking time and then being able to write effectively, just how important it is to young people. And I think that's probably the biggest things I've learned this week.
That's a brilliant one. I love that.
The Beckfoot Lifelong Learners Podcast, it took a bit of time to come up with the name, but I think it was really important that it didn't just focus on teaching and learning, because although that is mostly what Kelly and I look after at school, we wanted to have the opportunity for lots of different people to come and talk about what they're passionate about and what excites them and what they've been learning regardless of their role in school. So, I've been here 4 years. This is my 5th year, so Deputy for Teaching and Learning, and I blooming love my job. Probably annoyingly cheerful is what I'd go for. And
not annoyingly cheerful, wonderfully cheerful.
And we've been a team since I started. I've never known a different right-hand man at Beckfoot.
The dream team.
You've been here longer than
I have. I've been here for, this is my 7th year now, and 4 years in this particular role. I've done a couple of other assistant head roles in school. We pretty much come as a package, don't we? And been likened to Ant and Dec and Sully and Mike from Monsters Inc. But underneath all the kind of positivity and rainbows and sparkles and all of that is, an absolute passion for teaching and learning and making sure that kids get a really good deal, and also investing in the people that work here, because you are so important. And that's why this Lifelong Learners podcast is such a great idea, because hopefully it means that you'll all be able to get some access to some really good CPD at a time that suits you. And I think that's really, really important stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's not going to be one of our huge levers in terms of CPD, but it's about that culture.
Yeah.
Actually, we've got a team who want to talk about these things, who are excited about these things. So, when Dave said, "Oh, do you want to do a podcast?" I was like, "Well, do the staff want to do a podcast?" And he's like, "Yeah, they do." I was like, Okay. So yeah, that's where the Lifelong Learners podcast has come from.
Even if no one listens but our little bubble in Beckfoot.
We're having a nice time.
Even if it's just the four of us. We're enjoying it.
Okay, so podcast number 1. Awkwardly, Amy is going to be asking us questions and Matt is going to be asking us questions. But if I can start by asking you one, you have chosen what you want to talk to us about.
Yeah.
So Dave came up with the idea of the podcast. You said, I really want to talk to Nikki and Kelly about, I promise we didn't pay you. What is it that you want to talk to us about or ask us about, and why?
So I think teaching and learning has always been evolving at Beckfoot and pushing on, and I think ever since I've been here, the staff you want to do what's best, you want to do what's right for the kids, and everyone wants to be the best teachers they can be. And obviously in the past 4 or 5 years things have come on even more, but 4 years ago, 4 years ago I was on maternity leave with Emmy, and that's when the Beckfoot Way was kind of had the big launch, the big push. So I came back from that and was like, oh my gosh, I'm behind. How do I do a really good DNA? How do I scaffold really well? And for someone who's always been a bit of a geek and wanted to try my best, I felt a bit like, oh no, I'm behind. But amazing CPD, amazing faculty, I felt caught up. And then when I came back from it, I've just had Annie, obviously she's a year and a half now, but there was kind of the big launch of instructional coaching, the proper launch while I was on mat leave with Annie. So again, I came back and was like, oh no, I've missed out again. And I was just thinking, when Dave was chatting about this podcast, I was like, oh, this is the kind of thing that would be perfect if we could just pick your brains about, oh right, so what's it could be anything like the Beckfoot Way, or I thought I'd ask about instructional coaching first because that's the most, the most current thing. So just like from you guys' point of view, what is instructional coaching? Why are we doing it? For other people that are in my shoes, maybe they've come back from maternity leave, maybe they're new to the school, maybe they've just missed out on some CPD, or maybe they're a bit cynical about it and it's just like, oh, another thing. It's not just another thing, it's something that's going to make a difference. So I just wanted to ask, from your point of view, what are the key things we should be focusing on?
Okay, so if I talk a little bit about instructional coaching, and then I think if you want to talk about the Welcome Programme and how that ties in with Amy's question about coming back from mat leave or being a new member of staff. So for me, I think the really important thing to point out is that we didn't go into instructional coaching because it was all over Twitter. Actually, coaching is something that's been going on at Beckfoot long before I worked here, long before Kelly worked here. It's always been around.
Yeah, we had like teaching squares and stuff like that.
And even when we had, one-to-one coaching, like it has been here. But over the pandemic, trying to maintain that basically became nigh on impossible because staff weren't in school, but also because staff had other things to focus on. So learning how to teach over Teams and whatever else there might be.
Visualisers.
Yeah. But actually that afforded us the opportunity to think, okay, well, how are we going to protect the CPD for our staff even better? How are we going to prioritise and protect CPD for individual teachers? Because obviously, I'm going to quote Dylan William, every teacher needs to get better, not because they're not good enough, but because they can be even better. And I think our staff really buy into that, but they can only buy into that if we, as leaders, give them the time and the space and the resources and the skills to do that. So we looked at our current coaching model, and the problem was that it wasn't for everybody. So you'd have somebody that would be coached for about a term, and they might be thinking, oh, why me?
Yeah.
Even though it's a really nice thing, and then somebody else might be thinking, well, why not me?
Yeah.
And then it would go on to somebody else, and then you try and get through everybody in a year, but with the best will in the world, you just didn't, and it wasn't good enough, and it didn't meet our ambitions for CPD. So we sat back down, we thought, okay, if we are saying that we have school CPD structures, and based on development and refinement, we think they're serving their purpose and they're doing okay, then we have our faculty CPD structures, and based on development and refinement, they're doing okay. Actually, it's this individual area that we really need to work on. Well, then we've got to prioritise it, and we've got to protect it. So because we already had that collaborative planning time that's been around for forever, from 2:45 to 4:15, we said, well, actually, our faculties now are in a position where an hour would be okay, that our individual teachers deserve and have an entitlement to, alongside looking at school and faculty priorities, thinking about the areas of development or the leverage points that are really important to them. And so 30 minutes for me time was born, and instructional coaching came out of that. And I won't talk too much about the active ingredients of instructional coaching. There is reading out there, and people know far more about it than me, but ultimately it's that cyclical process where each coachee has their coach, and they meet once every 3 weeks, and over that period they will also have an observation. They're identifying those areas of development or leverage points that are really key to making those developments in the classroom, but tied into a framework of, well, if you're coming back from maternity leave,
this is what I want to focus on.
Start with the Beckfoot way first.
Exactly, and that's what helped me catch up.
Yeah, as a school, we're looking at these teaching learning priorities, so select from within this framework. So it's still, bespoke, and teachers have that agency to pick what works for them, but we're still all pulling together in the same direction because there's a certain amount of guidance. I haven't talked too much about instructional coaching, really. I've talked about where it came from.
But I think it's important for us to understand why we're doing it, the ethos kind of behind it, especially if you don't know anything about it. If you are new to the school, that's summed it up perfectly. This is why we're doing it, it's for us.
I think the entitlement part of it is really important, because like Nikki said, when we were doing, I think it was called Take 9 and Progress 10 before, and it was almost, I think people were a little bit afraid of it, because if they were singled out to be on it, it's what you talked about I get to do this. A lot of people didn't feel like I get to do this. They naturally felt like, well, why have I got to do this? And it's another thing. And am I having this because I'm not good enough? And we wanted to get away from that entirely and make it about, this is what you deserve, you deserve this. And so that, I think, is really important in terms of why we're doing it.
And like you were saying, Katie was doing the Take 9, and I was like, I've just come back, I don't know what these things are, someone could come and do that with me. And not that I ever felt like, but it was just like that opportunity, and I now feel like everybody's getting that opportunity.
And we don't have that thing of, oh no, but we will get you, I promise. But actually now something else has got in the way. Actually, nothing should be getting in the way of this. Nothing should be getting in the way of teachers having the time and space and that collegiate approach to work on what they do day in, day out. Like that's what's important. And I think we're doing it because we know that teaching and learning is the thing that will have the biggest impact on student outcomes. Yeah, we absolutely are. But also, as professionals, as individuals, as human beings, we have an entitlement to really feel invested in our profession. And I think, for us, it is absolutely both. I mean, Matt, you've been here, sorry, I know I'm not allowed to ask questions, but you've been here a long time. I don't know if you've got questions or, your take on it all.
Yeah, I think probably sort of linked on from that a little bit. I think Beckfoot is a very, very fast-moving school. Yes. And I think the leadership within, as a faculty leader, it moves very, very quickly. So if I think back to about 4 years ago, we used to do an awful lot of walkthroughs, and Nikki used to talk quite a lot about weighing the pig. And if I'm honest with you, you used to talk about weighing the pig, and I didn't really know what it meant. I just used to nod at you. And then obviously now I realise that if we're going to weigh the pig, then we need to feed it up to do more. And so I suppose the big change now is that as a faculty leader, we don't do necessarily as many walkthroughs all the time, because we've got our coaches to help us do that and support us with that. So I suppose it's, how do you get the balance right between these are school priorities, these are faculty or department priorities, and these are the individual priorities for that person within the coaching, and how do you drive that through your coaches as well?
Yeah. I mean, if I'll take an example and then you can perhaps take different examples. So, if I'm a member of staff and I'm working in maths, okay? So one of the whole school priorities this year is around literacy and embedding text into the curriculum. Now, for maths, that isn't as pertinent, but Holly, as the faculty leader, may well look at somebody doing some additional work around deliberate vocabulary development if she felt that wasn't as hot as it needed to be in maths yet. But she might just have a couple of her UPS teachers looking at that as part of their instructional coaching to drive that school improvement, but actually that will still contribute to their own success in the classroom. But then another school focus is metacognition, but because Charlotte was part of the trial group with Kelly, they've already kind of got that spot on. They've developed a metacognitive process linked to problem-solving questions and word-based questions, so they know they're not also having to think about that as well, because they spent the last 12 months working on that. And then our third area of focus is formative assessment and knowing before they go and checking for understanding and all the kinds of things wrapped up in that. And actually for maths, that's probably going to be where they focus most of their time. And whereas in another faculty, it might look slightly different. So although we're saying here are 3 big drivers that we need to look at over the next 2 years, we absolutely work, hopefully you feel like this, with our faculty leaders to say, well, what out of that is important for your team? Where are you going to spend that time focusing? And we talk about priority, strategy and timeline. So some of the priorities will be embedded through collaborative planning time. Like, let's sit down, let's look at these resources, let's brush up our subject knowledge, whatever else it might be. So we've identified this priority, and the strategy to make that come to life is collaborative planning time. And actually that's going to take the whole year. That is the timeline. But some other things are quick wins. They might be lower priority, but they're a quick win, so actually we can do them really quickly and box it off and it's out of the way. And a different priority might be better served, not through collaborative planning time, but through instructional coaching. And it sounds complicated, but actually that's where your faculty improvement plans and your collaborative planning time plans come in, because you as a middle leader go, I know as a school we're looking at these things. I know for my team the most important things from that are, and actually to achieve that, my collaborative planning time is going to look like this, and my coaching leverage points or action steps are going to be focused on this, and I'm going to work with my team of coaches. I mean, it builds capacity as well. You're going to head off to senior leadership one day, and then your team of coaches are going to be a bit more ready, like they're feeding into you. I mean, there's a lot in your question. I'm not sure I've answered all of it.
I think the other thing to talk about there is the tiers as well. So, if as a faculty leader you decide, okay, well, there's this area of need in my faculty, you've looked at results, whatever, and you know that this is an area that you want to work on, there are tiers of different coaching steps that can be taken that might be suitable to different members of your team. So you might not all be working on exactly the same practice, but you might be working on a practice from the same framework at different levels. So that foundational kind of policy level first, but then you might have someone who's got that nailed and they might move on to something else. So you've got the opportunity to kind of differentiate within a theme, so to speak, which I think is a really useful way to kind of think of it for leaders such as yourself, in order to kind of think, well, am I getting all my team to be working on the right thing?
Yeah. And I think with regards to walkthroughs, it's not that we don't do walkthroughs that aren't for coaching, but if we're going to go into a lesson, then we need to know why. Why are we going in there? Because if it's just to do a lap, and there is something in that. There is a sense of I need to know what's going on in the school, I need to know what's going on in the faculty, but it would be better to be, okay, we've looked at this data, or we've noticed X. I think it's Doug Lemov, but I could be lying, who talks about like hunting, not fishing, and it's just a much more effective way of doing things. Actually, if we're just going in for the sake of going in and we're not then closing the loop and doing something with that information. And I think for me, the distinction that I would give it is that when people are doing walkthroughs for instructional coaching, it's about improve, not prove, and it's absolutely for that teacher. And
it's less threatening.
You've identified in advance, this is what I want you to look at for me, please. Whereas when we're doing our other kinds of walkthroughs, it's for us? What do I need to do as a senior leader? What do I need to do as a middle leader? Actually, what isn't quite working out despite that CPD that I led? What do I need to do differently? How do I need to tweak my plans? Is everything going okay? So you've got, your coaching walkthroughs for the teacher, but the other kinds of walkthroughs shouldn't be more jobs for that teacher. I mean, how long did we spend just describing lessons back to teachers? You were there. Yeah. Did you know that I saw these things and you were there? I'm going to describe your lesson back to you. And that thing that you're working on because your appraisal told you to work on it. Can you also have a think about this and this? Because I'm describing lesson back to you. And next week, I'm going to describe your lesson back to you again and tell you some different things to work on. And we're just, we're not doing that.
It's got to be bespoke for, the whole thing about it is... bespoke.
And the fact that you don't have to do that anymore, because you talked about, a couple of years ago we used to do all these walkthroughs, and now you don't have to do those. You don't have to spend hours writing that feedback. It doubles your capacity again because it allows you more time to do things that actually have impact.
So my last question was pitfalls and things that might trip us up or obstacles. Is there anything that you've found or people are throwing up problems and strategies to overcome them?
I think the biggest thing's time, isn't it? And I think it's, as a school, we've got much better at this now, but certainly when we first started, people were struggling to make the time to see each other, and that's partly why 30 minutes for me was born. But also I think because some people are part-time and maybe the coaching pairs don't always tally up nicely in terms of frees, so that can be a problem. And I think that the solution to that is to make sure that you carve it out, and that has to be sacrosanct, that time. And if you're needing the time to go and observe somebody and you want to see them with a specific lesson where you don't have a free, we will do our best always, won't we, to cover. Just ask us. That's what we do. And
I mean, there's been loads of pitfalls for us. Obviously we made an implementation plan, but hindsight is a wonderful thing. You think, I definitely would have done that slightly differently. So for example, for year 1 to year 2, this year, everyone knows exactly what week their meeting is, rather than, I'm meeting once every, this is the date of my meeting, it's in the school calendar, therefore I know. And it's such a simple thing, but I talk about people not having to remember. We're far too busy.
Clarity.
We're not full-time coaches, so it's that, but it's also future-proofing the observation and the feedback as well. So, again, our feedback performer that we use, our coaching performer that we use this year says, and when is that walkthrough going to be? And when are you going to meet for the feedback? And how are you going to use that? When are you going to use that? How are you going to use that 30 minutes for me time when you're not meeting your coach to help feed into this leverage point you're working on? Because I think the clearer we can make it, the easier it is for everybody else, and the more we can make it so you don't have to remember, the better. So I think how we're using our documents has helped, and we will always offer to cover lessons. It's a great way to see what's going on in classrooms as well.
Can I give you the example of HUMS as well, just while we're here? So Humanities have got a lovely laminated big A1 sheet on their wall that basically says what coaching week they're on, who's working with who's doing what part of the process, and what the action step is they're working on. And they've pulled that together, and it's such a simple idea, but it just really makes it high profile and keeps people on track. And I think that's something that's to be celebrated, really.
And I think staff room conversations have always been one of the things that's really exciting about Beckfoot, but I know, from popping into English, they're like, what are you working on at the minute? And that's what we want people to be excited about it.
Oh, thanks so much, guys. Thank you for answering our questions.
Thank you.
And introducing it all over. It's fab.
Thanks for the idea.
It's your birthday today.
Happy birthday.
I realised yesterday that I did an ITT training session and I was double their age, literally double their age. So I was like,
Happy birthday,